A Spanish galleon sank in 1622, carrying enough silver to buy Manhattan. For 360 years, nobody found it, then one man did, and the legal fight that followed changed how we value history itself. The accepted story is straightforward. The Nuestra Señora de Atocha went down in a hurricane off the Florida Keys. Nobody could salvage it with 17th century technology, and it stayed lost until Mel Fisher, a professional treasure hunter, spent 16 years and a small fortune locating it in 1985. Heroic individual, solved problem, moved on. Except that's the version that makes everyone comfortable, and comfort is usually where the real story gets buried. Let's establish what we're talking about. The Atocha was a 550-ton merchant vessel, part of a Spanish treasure fleet returning from the New World to Seville in September 1622. It carried roughly 24 tons of silver, somewhere around $400 million in modern currency, though that number is slippery because silver's value has never been stable. The ship also held gold, emeralds, and copper. It was, by any measure, the richest wreck in the Atlantic. When the Atocha sank, the Spanish crown knew exactly where it went down. They had manifest records, survivor testimony, everything. The problem wasn't finding it. It was that the technology to retrieve something 55 feet down in the middle of a current-heavy reef system didn't exist. So Spain did what empires do. They wrote it off and moved on to the next shipment. Out of sight, out of the ledgers. For 3.5 centuries, the Atocha became folklore. Florida locals knew the story. Salvage operators had poked around the Keys looking for it since the 1800s, but nobody had the combination of capital, technology, and obsession required to actually find it. Then Mel Fisher entered the picture, and this is where the real economics begin. Fisher wasn't a romantic. He was a businessman with a specific insight: modern diving equipment, underwater metal detectors, submersibles, motorized dredges had finally made deep-wreck salvage economically viable. He didn't have unlimited money, so he structured his operation like a startup. He sold shares to investors, brought in salvage crews on commission, and essentially created a venture capital model for treasure hunting. Nobody in this story was stupid. Look at what they were being paid to see. The search took 16 years. Fisher's team operated on the theory that the Atocha's wreck had scattered across the reef and been buried under sand and sediment. They ran sonar, dragged dredges, and followed leads that often went nowhere. They found other wrecks, including the Atocha's escort ship, the Santa Margarita, but not the main prize. The operation burned through cash and investors got nervous, but Fisher kept the search alive through sheer persistence and a willingness to leverage everything he had. In 1985 they found it. The main wreck site yielded the bulk of the silver, along with gold and jewels. The haul was genuine, massive, and immediately valuable. But here's where the story inverts. The moment Fisher pulled that treasure from the ocean floor, he didn't own it. The state of Florida claimed it under salvage law. The Spanish government claimed it as a national patrimony. Federal authorities got involved, and suddenly, the real treasure hunt wasn't underwater, it was in courtrooms. This is the pivot nobody talks about. Fisher had spent 16 years and millions of dollars solving a technical problem. Then he spent another decade solving a legal one. The courts had to decide who owns a shipwreck: the salver, the government of the flag state, the nation whose territorial waters it sits in. The answer, it turned out, depended on which court you asked and what precedent you could cite. Fisher's argument was simple. He found it, he paid for it, he should keep it. The state of Florida's argument was equally straightforward. It's in our waters, so it's ours. Spain's position was more complicated. They claimed the wreck as a national historical monument, even though they'd abandoned salvage rights centuries earlier. Everyone had an incentive, and everyone had a law they believed supported their claim. The Florida Supreme Court eventually ruled in Fisher's favor. He'd salvaged the wreck, he'd taken the risk, and the state hadn't. But the court also imposed a condition. Fisher had to preserve the artifacts and make them available to the public. The result was the Fisher family kept the bulk of the treasure, but couldn't simply liquidate it. The wreck became a museum piece, a business asset, and a historical record all at once. Here's what the courts actually decided. Treasure hunting is legal, but treasure isn't a free good anymore. The moment you bring it to the surface, it enters a system of claims and regulations. The Atocha showed that the real value of a wreck isn't just what it's worth, it's who has the legal right to extract and sell that worth. That distinction changed how governments and private operators think about deep-sea salvage. The Atocha case created a template. Today, salvage contracts are negotiated before a diver ever touches the ocean floor. Governments license wreck sites. Investors understand that salvage rights are property rights, and they are worth something. The wreck itself, the historical object, became valuable not because of its market price, but because of the legal clarity Fisher had to fight for. The economic implication is subtle but enormous. Before the Atocha, wreck salvage was a gamble with no rules. After the Atocha, it became an industry with property rights, taxation, and regulatory oversight. That made it possible for venture capital to flow into it, which meant more wrecks got found, more artifacts got preserved, and more historical records got recovered. The legal fight, in other words, was what made modern treasure hunting economically rational. The Atocha itself generated an estimated $400 million to $500 million in value, not just in silver and gold, but in the legal precedent it established. That precedent is now worth more than the wreck. Every salvage operation that followed, every deep-sea mining claim, every offshore archaeology project, exists in the framework Fisher's lawsuit created. He didn't just find treasure, he found the rules that make finding treasure economically sustainable. The real story of the Atocha isn't about a shipwreck or even about silver. It's about how scarcity gets valued once you create a system to claim it. For 360 years, the silver sat in the ocean, worthless because nobody could legally own it. The moment the courts said Fisher could own it, it became valuable. That's not economics, that's law. And economics only works when law makes it possible. Today, the Atocha artifacts are housed in a museum in Key West. You can see the silver, the gold, the jewels. You can read the manifests. What you're actually looking at is the product of a legal innovation, a moment when the law caught up with technology and made treasure hunting a real business. That's the wreck that shaped empires, not the ship that sank, but the courtroom where its ownership got decided. The incentive structure that made the Atocha findable is still the one that drives deep-sea salvage today. Investors will fund a search if they believe the legal claim is solid. Governments will regulate it if they can tax it. And operators will risk capital if they know the rules won't change mid-project. The Atocha proved that treasure isn't about finding things, it's about having a system where what you find is legally yours to keep. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe for more episodes on how wealth, law, and incentives intersect across history. There's a new case every week. Subscribe for more episodes on how wealth, law, and incentives intersect across history. There's a new case every week. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.